Hello, you lovely people, and welcome back to Sabbatical Stories. I'm your host, Bex Thomas, and I'm still Sydney-side, recording this in Manly. I'd therefore like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Gamergal people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people listening today. I set up this podcast to inspire courage and normalise taking a break from your career. I'd love it if you could help too by subscribing, liking and rating the show. It really would mean a lot. Today I'm joined by Susie Chou, a former IT consultant who, when her husband's company went through a restructure, took it as a sign to take a year-long career break and travel to all 7 continents. After returning back to the corporate world, she started her travel agency in 2016 as a side hustle. Just a year later, she took the leap of faith into being a full-time entrepreneur and now helps professionals live abroad for a month or more so that they can spend more time in life mode instead of work mode. We chat about her career break and how it gave her the confidence to make this pivot and break away from the standard American blueprint of life. All that and much, much more. Deep down, you've tried, dig deep, search wide, enjoy. Hi Susie and welcome to Sabbatical Stories. Thanks so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
Well, look, as it's exactly that, your story, would you please give us an introduction to you, who you are and your sabbatical story, please?
Sure. So my name is Susie Chou and I took a year-long sabbatical with my husband. It was a bit of a turning lemons into lemonade situation. So my husband, the company that he was working for, they got acquired by a larger company. When he told me the news, I don't know what came over me, but what I like to call the sabbatical seed that was in the back of my head marinating for years. I pushed that dream away because I thought, well, that's certainly not something that I would do, especially as an American. That's not common at all in the US. When he told me the news, I said, well, you can find a new job now or you can find a new job later. He was absolutely not on board. It took months of convincing to get him on board with this vision that I kind of immediately had. What really, I think, helped solidify the decision was a couple things. One was the company that I was working for. I was a management consultant, did that for 13 years. I'm very grateful that I asked for a leave of absence and they very graciously granted me that. So it was not paid, but for that year I was able to go have fun and then return back to that same job when I came back. So knowing we had one income to return to, that was a huge comfort. The thing that really tipped the scales was a conversation that my husband had with his boss at the time. She was somebody that he really looked up to. She said, you'd be crazy not to do this, especially because there was severance involved in this, whole situation. So that also made it a little bit easier and gave us a little bit of a cushion. All of that kind of really just eventually we got the yes and we ended up traveling to all 7 continents during that year.
Yeah, wow.
It was an incredible experience and I'm so happy. I mean, obviously these are some of our most cherished memories together. And this was pretty new in our relationship, relatively speaking. I think in total we were together about 3 years. So this was, I think, a very big leap, just not only from a life standpoint, but also a relationship standpoint. I would say an acceleration of our relationship and working through issues and figuring out how to communicate and all of those things that kind of come along with uprooting your life.
It's so funny. My husband and I always make reference to the fact that you don't know each other until you've traveled together.
100%.
And I think if you want to test a relationship, you throw yourself into the most different culture to yours.
Totally.
Just the two of you and, it's make or break, right? We're in the middle of renovating a 16th century barn in France at the moment. And we now are saying, actually,
travel's one thing, but now you need to renovate together to the test of time.
That's a lot of decisions, yes.
And so your husband, did he have the decision to stay at the company if he wanted to?
He could have, but we would have to relocate. And
Yeah,
at that
okay.
point in our lives, that was a pretty easy no.
Yeah.
So the decision really was, do you want to ride it out and find a new job right away? Or, I kind of came up with this alternative option, a very alternative option. That's where we have to get a little bit creative with life. And it's so easy to get stuck in the routines and your 9 to 5s and just look at your circle around you and how they're living life, which is probably pretty similar to what you are. So this idea of taking a sabbatical and not just immediately finding a job, that was a very big departure from what anybody else at the company was doing. It does boil down to kind of lifting your head up and thinking differently about life. I think that that's what a sabbatical can give you, because I know that changed my trajectory of my life by doing this one thing that was off the beaten path. Because up until that point, I was very much your traditional, get good grades, go to a good school, get a good job. That's the way life goes. This was a big departure from that. I think that by taking that risk, it showed me that not only can I do hard or different things with my life, but it can turn out so much better than continuing on that path that honestly wasn't very fulfilling to me.
You said that there was already a seed marinating at the back of your head.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that come from? If you had this sort of blueprint of life laid out, where did this random seed come from?
Yeah, that came from doing a lot of traveling in my 20s. So I studied abroad. I had a program in France, so explored all of Europe, and that was just totally bit by the travel bug there. That honestly changed the goal of what job I wanted to seek out. So I chose management consulting because I thought that would give me the best opportunity to work internationally, which was my, initial goal right out of school. And it did. Honestly, within 3 years, I got on a project and lived in Rome for 5 months and worked with an Italian team, and it was magical. The seed really was planted, I would say, in hostel hopping, in different countries. And I remember one conversation with, I think he was an Australian in Argentina. I was so proud that my friend and I were spending 2 whole weeks in Argentina. I mean, that's a big deal for us Americans. He looked at me like, this is a massive country. Like, how can you only spend 2 weeks? I don't remember. I think he was spending at least several months in Argentina. That look and that conversation, I think, really solidified, people do this. This is something that is a lifestyle choice. It's not something that I'm familiar with. And especially coming from at the time I was still in corporate America, buttoned up, and, that's something like, in my mind, like, oh, hippies can do that, and like very like free will, free people, they can do that. But I can't do that. So it was, the identities didn't line up. I don't know. It was, I think, some of that like intuition and just kind of that jolt in me when I got this news from my husband, that it just came to the front of my mind. And I said, why not? Why not us? Why not me? Why not now? We have no kids at the time. There's nothing really stopping us. We were renting our apartment, so we can just not sign the lease. And thankfully we had, I guess, one other important note is that there was quite a big runway of notice because they were, going through the acquisition process. So we found out, I believe, in October, and the transition wasn't going to be complete until the end of June. So we had a pretty big amount of time that, he was still being paid. It's not like they found out that he was losing a job and, he was going to be out of luck tomorrow or in the next month. this was a pretty big window to kind of work through what that would look like, how much it would cost, all of those things that you need to consider before taking this step.
Once you'd convinced him that this was the great step to take, how long did you have to actually plan it?
I finally got a yes from him probably in January or February, and we left at the end of August that year.
About 6 months.
Yeah, I would say solid 6 months to be able to plan, sort out our life, figure all of that out. And from a travel standpoint, we honestly didn't plan too far in advance. That went against kind of my more type A personality. But from everything that of course, I read all the blogs that were out there and really tried to figure out like what's the right balance. And especially for the length of a year, the pretty overwhelming advice that I saw was, don't try to plan every day out of that year, because you'll just constrain yourself too much. And I am happy that we left it pretty loose, only kind of planning the next step or two. And we planned it while we went, which honestly was like a full-time job.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Just the travel planning while we were traveling. So that was a lot, but I enjoyed it.
So you touched on the financial advisor piece.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk us through the components of the planning in those 6 months. And I'd love to also, and I think the audience would love to know a little bit more around any advice that the financial advisor gave you on how to save, or how you actually, made it financially viable.
Yeah, I think the first thing that everybody needs to do is figure out a budget, which I remember being very, very difficult to be able to figure out how much is this life going to be. And at the end of the day, we ended up going over budget. All in, that still was less than what we would normally spend just living our normal life. And we were not living like a huge extravagant lifestyle, but it was really just swapping our expenses. So instead of rent, we put that towards accommodations. And instead of a car payment, that's transportation. We highly leveraged visiting friends and family that lived around the world, points and miles. I could talk for a whole half hour about that. We ended up getting all of our long haul flights just through miles that we had accumulated in credit card points. So I'm a big fan of that. I think that's an amazing way to lower your expenses. The other interesting, like from working with a financial advisor, she helped kind of figure out that budget too. And we were good savers, and, we decided that we were going to allocate some of those short-term savings that we had accumulated. And then she was kind of giving us quote unquote paychecks throughout our time. So it wasn't like in our bank account, there was $40,000. So if somebody like stole our ATM card or something, that we would just be in a very bad situation. So we were able to figure out what that right balance was of distribution of money throughout the year. The other thing that we set up before we left was a power of attorney, will, like all of that kind of legal paperwork, which it's not fun stuff to think about, but if it wasn't for her, I don't think that we would have thought like, oh, we better get our, legal ducks in a row. And just knowing that, for example, somebody at home, if there was a problem with one of our banks or something, they had the power to like go into a branch if we are in, let's say, Mongolia, and we can get this sorted. One of the other advantages that, my husband and I didn't really think about was like, there's tax advantages. We were not earning money during that time. So the government thinks that we're like just very poor, but we can take advantage of that like low income to sell certain stocks, or, because you don't have as much like capital gains. And I am no financial advisor or expert, so don't ask me like
caveat here.
Massive caveat. That's why we have a financial advisor. There's a lot of creative things that you can do from a financial standpoint. There's a lot of potential tax implications and sometimes advantages too, that's certainly worth looking into to figure out, how you can make your financial situation work with your dreams. If you can find a partner, especially a financial advisor that gets what you're trying to do, honestly, it's kind of fun.
I think it's all about calling in the individuals, isn't it? And leveraging the expertise that they've got.
100%. Yeah.
You talked about so you were in management consulting in a company and broached the conversation around the leave of absence.
Mm-hmm.
Just talk us through how you approached that and why you went down the leave of absence route rather than, I presume maybe they had a sabbatical or career break policy, or just talk us through how you approached that.
Wouldn't that be? Well, actually, this company that I was working for did have a sabbatical company, but I'm laughing just because that's
most don't.
Very uncommon. And
it's getting there. It's getting
growing,
there.
Yeah, I believe 11%. So it exists. That was for a month. We were looking to spend a full year. I prepared myself to have to quit because I did not know anybody who had gotten a leave of absence outside of, for medical necessity and things that were certainly not voluntary. Like, I'm going to go travel the world for a year. I was extremely nervous for this conversation, but I did my homework. I looked at the fine print to understand the policies, to figure out what are even the options. If you're listening to this, you may even be working with a company that has a sabbatical program, but they're just not advertising it. I knew that I was doing a good job. I was, respected at the company. So I had that going for me, but I was still really nervous. I prepared myself mentally just for the no. I was expecting that they would say, we can't do that, but you're more than welcome to put in an application when you come back and go through the hiring process. I sat down with the HR manager, and it was essentially, he wanted to obviously understand motivations and, timelines and all of that. After that conversation, it wasn't until then that the light bulb clicked. Then I put myself in their shoes and I realized, well, it's very expensive to hire somebody. If you already have somebody in your company that's doing a good job, they're happy, they just want a break, you don't have to pay them, then
not costing them anything.
Right. It's just, they're on the books, but you're not really actively doing anything. You're not even, sending out a paycheck or processing things. Mm-hmm. They're just kind of dormant there. And then they'll come back and do more good work. Like, that's a win-win. That's what I realized. I was like, oh, I should have thought about that before I had this conversation. So I help people. I'm happy that this topic came up because it is extremely nerve-wracking to go into a conversation like that. And I am happy that I prepared myself kind of for that worst case, but I ended up with best case scenario. And I think being able to put yourself in their shoes, not only from what I discussed, but also who you're talking to is important, especially if you're working with a smaller company where this would be a big hit, for if you were leaving. It's all coming from a consulting background. It's all about how you spin it, and also knowing who you're talking to, what kind of information will put them at ease. What do they need to know in order for that to be a win for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having the benefits to the company held close so that you can articulate the benefits to them. But also, I think you're right in around it's knowing your audience, knowing the right time, knowing how to frame it to get the best possible outcome. And everybody has different roles and different jobs, and we'll all have different cycles within those type of roles. So it's also maybe knowing the cycle and understanding when's a better time to sort of approach it or when's a better time to take it.
Yes.
But I think having done your research and due diligence to begin with, to be armed, they say knowledge is power, right? To be armed with all of that is a massive point. Mm-hmm. So look, talk us through what you actually did.
Yeah.
Tell us about the year.
The juicy stuff. Well, we dove right in and started in Mongolia. One of the things that we prioritized was experiences and going to places that we might not do on a normal vacation. So Mongolia absolutely fit the bill. One of my good friends, she was in the Peace Corps there. She told me about Mongolia, was never on my radar before that. Every story that she shared, I was just fascinated by because it's so different from any other place that I had been in the world. And I was very fortunate enough to have been to a lot of places before we even embarked on this journey. So based on the weather, because we were leaving at the very end of August, we clearly didn't want to be there in the winter time. And that was certainly the furthest from my comfort zone that maybe I've ever been when traveling. Part of that was even living with a nomadic family for a week. And that was just a fascinating experience. I mean, they spoke no English and I was extremely nervous beforehand, but so happy that I did it. The other thing was pushing ourselves to do things outside of our comfort zone, because that's where you really grow. That's where you really show yourself what you're all about. You can do hard things. That was very pivotal for our overall experience and feeling like we got something out of that year that we couldn't get just living in Chicago for a year. Those are the life experiences and the moments and memories that we cherish the most. Anyway, high level, we did Asia for a few months. Thankfully, my husband, his parents are from Vietnam, so we have some family and friends in Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand. We did a bit of China in a transit visa, which was pretty cool. It's a little loophole to get there without the longer visa. We also then dipped down to Australia, which was not in the plan, but my husband has an aunt that lives there. I have some really good friends, and that was our first major departure. Our original plan was just do Asia, come back home for Christmas, but we added Australia to that. And then we came home for Christmas. We realized that we were just going very fast and we might actually want to shorten our window. We were at home in Chicago, my sister's home, because we didn't have a home. And we realized, you know what, let's just go big. Let's do Antarctica. We had shelved that because it was the cost. It was much more expensive than we had planned for in the budget. But we were like, well, if we shorten the time frame, then we can make that work. So we went to my dear friend's wedding in the Dominican Republic, hopped down to South America, did Antarctica, explored some more of South America, specifically Argentina and Chile, and then did Europe. And at that point, we just added on Morocco to check off Africa, because we were like, well, we can't do just 6 continents. If we hit Australia and Antarctica, like, come on, Africa is easy. We had been to South Africa before, but like we wanted 7 continents on that trip. So that became the new goal. And then we ended up doing a cross-country road trip around the US while we waited for our new place that we were going to be moving into to be ready. So it was a whirlwind. It was amazing. Lots to learn. I will say, in terms of lessons learned, it was too fast.
What specifically was too fast?
The pace.
The pace, okay. The moving from place to place to place to place.
On average, we were staying in places, I think 3.5 nights. When we were traveling on our own, it was that slippery slope of, well, there's just that place that's, a couple hours down the road. Everybody says it's amazing. So we ended up kind of just following those nudges, which I'm happy with every place that we saw. And I'm happy that we did that when we were young. There's no way we could do that now. We have a 4-year-old. I'm still happy that we had that experience.
It's hard as well, isn't it? If you've allocated a year and halfway through, you're like, actually, we could do all 7 continents. And then you're in Morocco and you've got X amount of time there and you're only 2 hours away from something. Whereas if you were back in Chicago, the cost of getting to that said place and the time,
totally.
It's hard. It's a hard balance. It is. And I think if travel was the theme and the actual kind of vehicle for that year, yeah, it sounds like it was absolutely amazing. How did life compare before and after? And my burning question is, did you go back to management consulting?
I did. Well, to get that paycheck, I did. I eventually started my own company. I'm sure some people are interested to hear what that transition was like, kind of back to the real world.
Absolutely.
What I was not anticipating, because I was going back to the same job, something that I had done for, over a decade before that, I was expecting to just slide right in. But what was really interesting were 2 things. One, before I officially started, I joined the company had a quarterly meeting and at a big conference center. And I just looked around and I said, everybody is so fancy, because I was like for a year in flip-flops, like I haven't touched a pair of heels. Like the only exception was my friend's wedding. So one day out of a year, looking at everybody in their, fancy business clothes, that was a shock I was not expecting. And then the second thing, which lasted about 2 weeks, it was like learning a new language again, which was business speak. So especially in consulting, all of these business words, synergy, efficiency, strategy, they did not fall out of my mouth like they used to. I had such a hard time, but also it was listening. So people would talk to me, because I had to get on a new project. And so people would be talking to me about different projects, and I had to concentrate so hard. I knew every single word that they were saying, but the amount of mental effort that it took to understand, and like my brain had to catch up.
Align with this. I so align with this. After our long sabbatical, I remember being on the phone to a client, and whereas I would have normally taken a job brief so easily and probably written down just a few bullet points, I was so, I don't know, just not in that wavelength, that I was then writing everything that this person was saying. And then I couldn't keep up. And then I'd almost lost that skill. And it takes a while to get back, doesn't it? But it is the listening.
I figured that was locked in, decade of experience.
I know, like riding a bike.
But I mean, it did.
It comes back, yeah. It's like a muscle, isn't it? It's like a muscle, in the fact that if you haven't used it consistently, it takes a couple of weeks to come back. Yeah, I totally hear you.
Yeah. And the other strange thing that just popped up that I haven't thought about in a very long time was it was strange introducing myself with my full name again. Also, I just realized now, because it was my married name, because I got married before I left, but I didn't really have to do any introductions. And then when I'm on the road, you just need first names. So then I was coming back and I was like, I'm getting a new identity, not only like literally in my name, but also trying to speak in this way. And I don't know, I really was not anticipating any kind of issues or hiccups with that transition back, because I was going back to what I was used to. So there were some surprises.
Don't the travel community call it reverse culture shock?
Yeah, 100%. I was surprised that I guess I didn't anticipate that. So I like to share that story, because there are some things that, depending on how long you're going for, your brain adjusts and it has new neural pathways and, is learning a whole lot of other things. So it's got to make some space in there. It will come back. It just might take you a few weeks, if you're listening and just thinking about that, just put that in a seed and then, be aware.
Be aware. And be kind to yourself. So how long were you there before you set up on your own? And
so let's see, we got back September 2014, and I started my business the beginning of 2016. So it wasn't right away, but I knew that, especially after coming back, everybody was always asking me about travel. I mean, before we even left, but certainly it escalated very, very much so after returning home from this massive experience and all of that travel experiences that people wanted to hear about. I started getting kind of the inkling, like I should start something where I can get paid for all of this travel advice and, create these types of experiences for people, which is something that I'm passionate about. And I always kind of wanted to do, but I didn't see myself doing that. And I think that was part of the identity shift that happened while I was on sabbatical. Was it gave me the confidence, like I said before, to show myself that I can do something that's different than what I thought I would do in life and what everybody around me is doing, but also the clarity on what I'm most passionate about, what really lights me up, and how I can serve the world in a way that will improve it. So I kind of slowly started to explore options in the travel industry. I decided to start my own travel agency at the beginning of 2016. And I did that as a side hustle for a while, maybe a year. And then I moved to part-time in management consulting, part-time in my business. So it was a ramp, a long ramp before I didn't just say, I'm going to take the leap. You know, for some people, they can take the leap, the net will appear, all of that. But that was not my personality. Yeah. So that whole process was about 2 years before I did go off on my own in 2018 full time. I think coming back after the sabbatical, I had more of that perspective and more of the, like I said, the confidence, but also motivation to do something. Like, life is short. And I think that a sabbatical, you can embody that more than, because you logically know if you're working in a 9 to 5, doing your routine every day, you know, life is short. You hear all these messages and, you know, memes and things on the internet that are reminders. But if you're not living in that way, you know, a sabbatical is an amazing leap towards experiencing that and seeing how that feels, because it's such a big departure from your normal routine. So I knew that I didn't want to live in a way, you know, where I wasn't being fulfilled, which was my 9 to 5, much more than 9 to 5 hours. But
I was going to say, in management consultancy, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, like 9 to 9. But I knew that was something like in my soul that I needed to do and to at least try out. I knew that I could always go back. Worst case scenario, you know, again, I have those skills. They're locked in. It might take a couple weeks to refresh it and, you know, get it to the front part of my brain, but it's there.
Yeah. And I also think that travel, and you mentioned the pace that you guys went at. You took a year and, okay, you did 7 continents, but didn't scratch the surface of the world. So it also puts into perspective, doesn't it, of how large the world is, how much there is to see and how short life is. So it does put that into perspective as well. So I presume that, you know, your whole year also to put into perspective how much there is to see and how little time there is, and therefore reiterate how, you know, life is short. It sounds like there's been heaps of ways that your sabbatical contributed to your personal growth. What was the most unexpected part of the journey for you?
The most unexpected part, other than learning to go with the flow a little bit more, because we didn't plan it, you know, everything out to a T, which usually that's how I would approach trips. So getting comfortable with going with the flow, spontaneity, seeing the beauty in spontaneity and having conversations and seeing where that leads. And that's something that I'm a big proponent of, but it is a learned skill for a lot of us. And especially when you travel, can be such magic if you leave some blank spaces in your itinerary, see where, you know, you wander that day, what conversation you might have, and just see where that leads you. That's, I think, usually where the gold is with any kind of trip.
I love that. And you're right, that ability to be able to embrace the ambiguity and really go with the flow can lead to utter magic. And I think that's the same, you know, whether there's travel laced in or not, but travel certainly enhances it. Look, we're coming to the end, but what I would love to ask you, and how I like to close the show, is if you could share with us and with the audience your top 3 tips on taking a sabbatical or career break, so that anybody who is listening to this that is, you know, anticipating or thinking about or about to embark on one can really learn from your experience. What would they be?
The first tip would be getting clear on your intentions, your why, your goals. Why do you want to do this? Because I think that if you have a vision for what you would use that time for, that's a massive motivator to get you to overcome the challenges that inevitably come up when you're planning. And, you know, that will give it more importance and more priority over some of the things that are certainly it's more comfortable to stay where you're at, even if you don't like it. You know, human nature,
Absolutely.
We're going to default to what's comfortable.
Change is hard.
Sabbatical is very, you know, it's not an easy thing, and it takes courage to do, whether you travel or not with that time. If you do want to travel during that time, I would say to think about the things that you might not be able to do or want to do when you're older. I think that, for so many of us, retirement is that time that we'll travel and we'll explore. And yes, we can do little trips here and there every year. But I think that thinking big picture, what are the experiences that you want or the places that you want to go that you might not be able to do when you're older, those that are also outside of your comfort zone. The last thing is slow down to the point where you might be uncomfortable. And I know, especially if you're traveling, it is a slippery slope. Even if you find a pace that's, maybe fast, but comfortable to you, it's slowing down and taking time during each day, maybe getting a daily routine going where you can have some reflection time, because it's very easy to want to get up and go sightseeing. You're in this place, but even just having a small little mini routine or ritual that you do that can help lock in some of these memories and the gift that you're giving yourself with this time. And, that could be journaling or meditating, whatever it is that is effective for you that maybe you want to do in your daily life, but you're just not doing because you're too busy. This is a time to slow down, and that's going to look unique to each individual, because travel is very sexy and it's fun. But if you don't slow down at any point, whether that's big chunks of time or little chunks every day, then you're not going to make progress on getting some of that clarity that you might need about your future, which is, I think, so core to taking a sabbatical, is figuring out and reassessing your life from a different perspective and what you want to do going forward.
I love it. Absolutely. And I think your number one, the why, and finding the why in the reason for taking the sabbatical influences then and really should influence and needs to influence the number two, that what you're going to do. I see so many people who decide they're taking a sabbatical, design what it looks like, and it's not connected to the why. And so you also mentioned burnout there. Some people actually, for a component, just need to rest and recuperate and not go and, I don't know, climb Kilimanjaro or throw themselves out of an aeroplane, or, it is just about actually, what's the reason for you taking it? If it is, the reason for you taking it is to push yourself out of the comfort zone, brilliant, go and do all of that. But if the reason is R&R, maybe how you design it needs to look a little bit differently. Thank you so much for your time, Susie. And if anybody who is taking a sabbatical or just a holiday would love to partner with you and work with your travel agent, well, how's the best place to find you?
Absolutely. My company name is Carpe Diem Traveler, seize the day. You can connect with me at Carpe Diem Traveler on Instagram and Facebook. I'm also on LinkedIn, Susie Chou, Chau. I would absolutely love to help you plan out the travel aspects, if that is core to what you want to experience, whether that's for the whole thing or, just a portion of your sabbatical, and really do that in an intentional way. And, incorporate some of the things that I talked about on this episode, and making sure that you're making the most of it, not only your time, also your financial investment, and, finding those experiences that really align with your why and your purpose. That is my bread and butter. I absolutely love doing that and helping people through this really exciting, but also kind of challenging time.
Your face totally lights up when you talk about it. So I can see that that's your absolute passion. Well, look, thank you so much for your time. And thank you. I really do appreciate it. You take care.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Appreciate your situation. Let's try to keep this real.
Thanks so much for listening. I really do appreciate each and every one of you taking the time to join us. Thanks heaps to Susie for sharing her sabbatical story. And I particularly loved Susie's tips around preparing for her break and some of the more kind of administrative tasks and considerations that we haven't actually touched on before. Things like legal power of attorneys when travelling for a long time and potential tax breaks of taking a career break. Thanks as always to Auntie B at the Flaxen, my amazing, patient and talented producer, and a massive shout out to the incredibly talented Joanna Cook, whose soulful blend of smooth vocals we're lucky enough to use throughout the show. If you've enjoyed the episode, I'd love it if you could like and rate the show. And if you want to make my day, leave a positive comment too. Also, if you think a friend would like this episode, please do buzz it over to them. Your support means so much, and spreading the word helps even more. Hey, do you have a sabbatical story to share? Or maybe you might know someone whose journey would inspire others. I'd love to know. You can get in touch via Sabbatical Stories Podcast on Instagram or message me on LinkedIn. I'm Bex Thomas. Until the next time, take care of yourself, keep dreaming big, and remember, your sabbatical story is waiting to be written.
And I'm moving.